Thanks very much. I'm going to speak very slowly for everyone here, so you can understand my very thick Scottish accent. I want to do part two of what Jane's excellent presentation. All the presentations have been first class. What you're doing here, I did 15 years ago. 15 years ago, I devised the concept of the digital healthcare village. 7 years later, we ran a trial. We started to develop it. It's not moved on. You have a fantastic opportunity to take that forward for a host of reasons which I'll discuss later. I want to make a couple of points. The technology works. No doubt about that. The technology works. There are significant commercial, technological opportunities which can go to market. They do go to market, even if they're not integrated within the system. Key point here, strategic leadership and coordination. You've got three main agents: political, commercial, and the public. They're all different stakeholders. And I want to come to the previous presentations. Mr. Parks, Mr. Lees, who's not here at the moment, but his previous presentation. They were talking about the integration and engagement with the stakeholders. If you don't have that purchase from these stakeholders and you can't push hard, Jane made this point, Professor Hendy made this point about pushing hard and quickly, agility, mobility. If you don't have these things happening, forget it. Forget it. It's not going to work. Now, I'm very, like Jane, Professor Hendy, I'm very direct. So I will be very direct. And despite people not understanding my accent, they will get this message. You will have to push hard. You will have to be mobile. And you have to be agile. You are on shifting sand with very powerful stakeholders. Why? Because the stakeholders have all different expectations. And you will have one group speaking the same message with two different meanings. They will expect you to show a financial benefit to save money, but they will also, implicit within those statements, expect you to develop technology that can go to market. So these are two separate things, but contained within the same message. Now, I joked earlier about my accent. That message everyone is understanding. Everyone in this room is understanding that message. Now, I talked about what I did 15 years ago. It was incredibly difficult because we didn't have all the key stakeholders and we didn't have longevity from the stakeholders. Now, there's a lot of people nodding their head within that audience. So these relationships are very important. Now, one of the relationships that I'm not even came to the slides yet is these commercial relationships. These organised, now you're blessed in South Korea by having key industrial partners. They must be courted. And you know what I mean by courted? It's like dating. It's like a husband and wife. that is a main lesson. You may think it's a minor lesson. It's a macro lesson. In the UK, we have a multinational company, not British. It's not appropriate that I name them, but they are ready and getting themselves ready to compete in this market. Now, going back to Professor Hendy's point, there's been a hiatus. You are at the forefront, but be under no illusions. There are other countries, some very near to you, and there's some major international commercial actors and agents getting ready. Why? Because if you can do this well, the rewards, both in the terms of the health of your population and economically, are major. Now, everyone in this room should know that, and I expect them to know that. So that's why this is happening. Now, I talked about things not realising its potential. I talked about the key stakeholders not in alignment. Different technological developments at that time couldn't be promulgated and taken to market. That's another lesson. Get things to the market quick. Push hard on them. And also, and I'll come to that in the presentation, which will be quite quick because I'm using up mostly what I'm going to say to you here. Knowledge exchange systems did not speak to each other. Did not speak to each other. So that's why you talk about a national, when we're talking about a learning system. If you have tons of data, who looks at it? What are you going to do with it? Where are you going to take it? And how are you going to make it with a commercial worth? I listened. I cannot speak one word of Korean. I can barely speak English. But yet, I got the message from Mr. Park's and Mr. Lee's presentation. I knew what they were wanting to do. Even though I could not speak one word of Korean, I knew what they were wanting to do. But their challenge will be is, how do you get the systems to speak to each other? How do you get purchase? How will you drive it forward? And where will you take it when you're there? These are the big questions you've got to ask each other. Now, Professor Hendy said that she was optimistic that South Korea could do it. I'm very optimistic. This is my first time in your lovely country. And when I left the airport, I mentioned to Professor Hong about the density. And when I was coming here, I saw the industry. There's a lot of industry in this country. There's a lot of technology, which is on every street, on every person's wrist, and in every person's back pocket or jacket. This, if any place, it's primed for it. It can do it. But you have to address the longevity issue. Mr. Park and Mr. Lee could leave their job tomorrow. Who's got to replace them? Will they have purchase with the vision? Will that be embedded for this tape? Because that's the degree of granular embeddedness it needs to succeed. In the failure within Britain, that's the lesson. You need the longevity of the vision. Now, as Professor Hong is immortal, I'm sure he's going to be here to see it promulgated. But we need things which will be intergenerational, even though the technology happens at such a rapid pace. Now, I'm going to go to the slides here, so I'm going to have to, I'm always tested by technology. Does the top one move it? Top one. So, the current system is fatally flawed, particularly for knowledge exchange. Our good colleagues, Professor David Bloom at Harvard, and he's been knighted, Sir Aziz Sheikh at the University of Edinburgh, who's the head of the FAR Institute, are part of that jigsaw. What you have is jigsaws. This is three-dimensional chess you're playing to put this all together. You've got this level, and that level, and you have to make sure they're all in alignment. So the current system is fatally flawed. We have to accept that. Costs are expanding, they're out of control. As Professor Hendy accurately said, in the United Kingdom, they're out of control. Out of control. So we have a whole host of challenges. The previous in the United Kingdom, most governments have seen digitisation as a panacea for everything. I think they can go to this, it's a magic wand, we can use it, it can do, it can't. It comes back to Professor Hendy's point about changing culture, real strategic leadership, because in itself, it doesn't do anything. The point that I was nodding profusely when Professor Hendy was speaking, because everything she said, I have experienced. As an academic and in policy, people want one thing, what they're familiar with, they love the technology, they know the technology works, but they still want the visit from a practitioner. So there's no cost saving. So why, I said earlier, the South Koreans are in a strong position. Part of that is culture. One of the things that struck me this country is the power of the family. I've only been here 36 hours, but that is very clear. So that's a foundation. That's a very strong position. Now that might seem like an odd point that I'm making there, but it's pivotally important. Pivotally important. I'll come back to this at the end of this presentation. So there's major challenges. I'm just going to briefly go through these because these have been discussed previously. You have changing demographics. You have increasing numbers of people with long-term conditions. And you have ongoing concerns about the safety and quality. And of everywhere, worldwide, the push and pull factors of spiraling health costs. I'm pushing 60. A couple of years' time, I will be 60. In my lifetime, the costs for health have dramatically increased year on year. And for the younger people in the audience, away at the back, one day you will be as old as me, trust me. So, you do have possible solutions to address this in the UK. You can increase taxes, direct and indirect. You can increase retirement age. They've done that already. You can modify the pensions. They've done that already. You can encourage immigration. They've done the opposite in the United Kingdom. And you can cut expenditure on public services. None of these are politically acceptable. And there's a lot of in the audience again. We all have Politicians, for good or ill, make policy. And the electorate don't like these things. It's very difficult to go to the electorate and say, oh, we're going to cut your services and increase your taxes. Usually that is not met with universal acclaim. So I'm just going to, very briefly, this is how we developed the healthcare village. In 2002, the government of Tony Blair wanted to improve IT. Everything that Jane's outlined was generated from that. There was a monument, none of it succeeded, by the way. Not one, we spent billions of pounds. Not hundreds of millions of pounds, billions of pounds, and it failed. Because we couldn't, remember earlier I talked about three-dimensional chess. We could not get things in alignment. So, I have a phrase I sometimes say, I'm going to share it with you. And I hope it translates well. When you do things well, it looks like you've done nothing at all. It's so simple. It's so elegant. But behind that is superb organisation. We couldn't do it because we didn't have the superb organisation. We couldn't get things in alignment. That's widely accepted by policymakers is what we did wrong. So there's a big lesson for you. Ask yourself this question. How organised is this society? How much purchase is there in the vision by the policymakers to make this successful? How strong is the appetite among your commercial partners to get things to market? Of these stakeholders, who is the most enthusiastic? If I asked you a question here, don't need to answer it, but answer it to yourself. Which of these stakeholders wants this the most? So this was the vision for data, to harness health data for patients and public benefit by setting the international standard for the safe and secure use of electronic patient records and other populations based on data sets for research purposes. In the United Kingdom, and there's 4 countries within the United Kingdom, the data is immense. We use a fraction of it. A fraction of that data is used because we don't know what we're going to do with it. I asked you a question. Well, how are you going to use it? Where are you going to take it? Now, the government will want you to reduce costs. But I said earlier, it will want you to take these technological innovations to market quickly. So, whole host of key issues. Now, Jane and I wrote our presentation separately. It's as if we were like part 1 and part 2 here. Again, first point I made is the point that Jane made about collaborative leadership. Cutting edge research, public engagement, governance, critical things. Harmonised infrastructure, industrial partnerships. If I asked you, who are your preferred partners? I would expect you to say, I want to work with this company or that company or the other company. I would expect you, even at this stage, to have in your mind who you're going to work with. And I would expect them to be courting you. I would expect you to be currently in dialogue with them because it's in your best interest to speak to them sooner rather than later. And again, about communications. Everyone has to be on the same script. And as I joked earlier, and I'm not joking, I have a very thick Scottish accent, but my message should be coming very clear to you what the pitfalls for going forward are. So, I mean, this is what you're wanting to create. So this is the technical stuff. We were trying to generate evidence. That's what we wanted to do. And then generate that evidence, get it to market, to get the products to market. It worked, but we couldn't scale it up. We couldn't. That's why I was listening to Mr. Parks and Mr. Lee's presentation so intently. And as I said earlier, I can barely speak English, but I could, even though I can't speak one word of Korean, I could get what they were trying to do. I could tell you all the challenges that you're going to be facing, but the quicker you speak to these commercial partners, the better. So that was the mission. Protect and improve the nation's health, address inequalities, working with national and local government. That's why the point that you were saying about national and local agents is so critical. Industry, academia, and the public, voluntary sector as well. So that we would have a triple aim, better health, lower costs. Your key actors and agents will want that, and better care for individuals. I'll rattle through this because I've taken up so much time, so apologies for that. I'm going to ignore that one, and I'm going to go through that as well. You can read these at length. I want to start to conclude. Since I've watched the presentation, I've rewritten this presentation. I wanted to add something at the end. My wonderful colleague, Professor Haben Lee, very kindly took us to the museum today. And he was very surprised by me because he said I knew a little bit about Korean history. When we were walking down to the museum, I recognised the turtle ships. Instantly, didn't even say to me, I recognised them immediately. And the reason why I mention them is this. The turtle ships saved Korea. There would not be a Korea without them. It's an accepted fact. When the Japanese were going to invade Korea, these were the weapons they used. What did your ancestors do? They used simple technology but had superb organisation. They had mobility. They had agility. They did it. The challenge is for you to have all those things. Create your own turtle ships for health. Now, I should really be a politician. I'm wasted in academia sometimes. But that is the lesson. If you can do these things, simple technologies, superb organisation, have agility, mobility, then you can do it. So I am extremely optimistic in my little visit to South Korea, but I have got to meet Professor Hong, even though I think he struggles with my accent every time I speak. But as I said earlier, even though you may have difficulties with my accent, my